This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Baruchim Abba, welcome everyone to a special edition of All Parsha on Parshas Vayishlach, the Ramban. On Parshas Vayishlach, we'd like to examine two fundamental passages of the Ramban that discuss how the subject of Parshas Vayishlach is symbolic of future events for the Jewish people, specifically in their interactions with the Roman Empire, the Roman government, based on the principle of Maseh Avos Siman Labanim, that the interactions of Yaakov Avinu and Esav portend to the future interactions of Klal Yisrael and the Roman Empire. The Ramban opens the Parsha, he says, Nichtava ha-Parsha zois. This Parsha was written, Lo hidia, to make known, Ki hitzal HaKadosh Baruch Hu es avdoi, that God saved his servant Yaakov, uga aloi miyad chazak mimenu, and he redeemed him from the one stronger than him. Vayishlach malach, and God sent an angel to rescue him. Vayatzilehu, who saved him. Now what malach? Well, Yaakov Avinu talks about the malach. Yaakov Avinu even says, Hamalach hagoyel oisimi kara, that the Rebbeinu Shalom sent a protective angel to guard and to watch over Yaakov Avinu in his time of danger. So that's the first lesson that this week's Parsha teaches us, that Hashem protects his servants. Number two, to teach us further that despite all of Yaakov's righteousness, Shehulai batach b'tzidkasa, he did not trust and rely only on his righteousness. And he made his own efforts with all of his ability. He came up with various plans to save himself. And third of all, there's also a future allusion to future generations. Because whatever occurred with our forefather in his interactions with Esav, his brother, this is a recurring phenomenon of what will occur between us and Esav descendants, Edom. And therefore we need to follow in the pathway of Yaakov Avinu. We need to follow in the pathway of the righteous Yaakov, that just like Yaakov Avinu prepared himself for three things, we also have to prepare ourselves in three ways. In the three ways that he prepared himself, namely Litfila, for prayer, Uledoirain, for gifts, and for warfare. Just like Yaakov Avinu, he prepared himself with Tefillah, to be rescued from Esav, bribery, and war, to either war, to run away and be saved. This is an allusion that Chazal have detected in this Parsha, Kasher Azker, as I will mention, and I would like to share with you those comments of the Ramban later, where he elaborates on this principle that this Parsha was written for us to glean our future interactions with Esav. Now, it's interesting. We're going to see that Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, in Kavetz Ma'amarim, he quotes the Gra that this whole subject of Yaakov with Esav represents the station of Klal Yisrael in what is called Ikvasad Mashiach. Yaakov's interactions with Esav, returning finally at the end of the long galus of Yaakov to Eretz Yisrael, represents the very end of the galus and the return of the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael. And so it's not only that Yaakov's interactions with Esav portend to our future interactions with Edom, but to a specific point in Jewish history, namely the point that we are currently living through, what is known as Ikvasad Mashiach, where in the end of days, at the end of the long galus, when Klal Yisrael finally makes its way back to Eretz Yisrael. Please take a look in the Ramban, Perek Lamed Gimel Pasuk Tezvav, where Esav offers Yaakov Avinu some men to stay with him, and Yaakov Avinu basically says, thanks but no thanks. Lama ze emtza chen be'enei adoni. Let's focus on these words. Lama ze, why this? Emtza chen be'enei adoni, let me find favor in the eyes of my master. what exactly was Yaakov Avinu telling Esav? So Ramban says, quoting Rashi, Lama zeh, why this? Meaning, Ta'asili tov v'shein tzarchla. Why are you doing this favor for me that I don't need? And then Emtzachein, I will find favor beinech in your eyes. Please don't pay me anything right now. This is the language of Rashi, Lashon Rashi. V'hakavana liYaakov. The kavana to Yaakov was ki lo haya chafetz b'hem uv'chaburasam kal. Yaakov's kavana basically was he was saying thanks but no thanks. He had no interest in having any of Esav's men with him. He also had no intention of going to Esav and Seir. He was going to Eretz Yisrael. However, the Ramban then elaborates on the points that we were discussing earlier. Our rabbis have seen further counsel on this. The Bereshis Rabbah, Parsha Ayin Ches, Rabbi Yanai kad have a solik l'machusa. When Rabbi Yanai went up to deal with the government, have a mistaka b'hadei Parshasa, he would analyze this Parsha, v'lo have a nasvi mei Roman, and he would never bring Romans to accompany him based on the limud that he would glean from Yaakov Avinu, who would not want any of Esav's men to accompany him. One time Rabbi Yanai did not analyze Parshas Vayishlach in anticipation of meeting the Roman government, v'nasavi mei Roman, and therefore the lesson was sort of forgotten by him, and he took with him Romans, and he suffered the consequences. They extorted out of him some valuables. He didn't reach Akoy ad shemachar pinas shaloi, until he had to sell his coat. Because our sages have a tradition, Shazu Parshas Galos. This Parsha is a description and the architectural plans of the exile of the Jewish people. And whenever they would come to Rome, to the courtyard of the kings of Rome for communal affairs, they would analyze and look deeply into this parsha, to follow the counsel of the great sage and the elder Yaakov Avinu, from him all future generations will see, and follow suit. And therefore, one of the limudim we learn from Yaakov Avinu is he would not, and they would not accept any Roman assistants to accompany them, because she'ein makarven el hanas atzon, they do not draw anyone close to them, only for their own benefit, mafkirin ma'maynai shal adam, and they just completely disregard anybody's money. So, according to the Ramban, this parsha is the parsha of Golos. As we mentioned, the Gaon, quoted by Rabbi Chanan, learns that this parsha portends not just to the Golos, but to the period that is known as Ikvasad the Mashiach, the period of time immediately before the coming of Mashiach. And therefore, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, based on the Gra, analyzes all the details of this parsha and its portend to our times. And one of the very compelling things Rabbi Chanan says is that when Yaakov Avinu finally encounters Esav, first Esav encounters the Shvachos, Bilhah and Zilpah and their children, followed by Leah and her children, followed by Yosef and Rachel. Says Rabbi Chanan, this also is a remez to the future, that in the end of days, the leaders of the Jewish people, those who will dominate and rule, will be the Erev Rav, which are represented by the Shvachos. And then, following then, will be the average person, the Hamoin Am, who is Nichna to the Erev Rav, represented by Leah Viladeha, and the Talmidei Chachamim, represented by Rachel and Yosef, they will be very last. So even the order of procession in which Yaakov Avinu had his family meet Esav represents the various status of the Jewish people in the end of days. If we may add one particularly compelling idea, we know that Yaakov Avinu was very frightened. Vayira Yaakov ma'od vayetzer lai. And Rashi says he was afraid, Shema yeharek, he was afraid lest he be killed. Vayetzer lai im yaharoig achirim. he was distressed if he would have to kill others. So the Maharal asks, who exactly are these others? He was distressed if he'd have to kill Esav. So say Esav, why Achirim? Furthermore, why would he be distressed if he would have to kill Esav? Esav's coming to kill him. Esav is a roidev, so Yaakov has to kill Esav. So many Svarim bring this idea. It's brought in the Sefer Pninim Yikarim, the Pardes Yosef, Mayana Shel Torah, a wondrous pshat that Achirim actually is a reference to the great Tana Rav Meir. If you look at the end of Horia, it's because of a certain incident that occurred. Rav Meir was called Achirim. And Yaakov Avinu did not want to kill Esav. Not because he didn't want to kill Esav per se, but because of a great personality who would emanate from Esav, namely Rav Meir. Rav Meir was actually a descendant of Esav, Ayin, Gittin, and Vav, that when Nero Caesar had a change of heart and he decided not to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, he converted, and from him came Rav Meir. So Rav Meir was a descendant of Esav. So Yaakov did not want to kill Esav lest he knock off Rav Meir. And the question is, why specifically at this juncture of time is Yaakov Avinu so frightened lest he kill Rav Meir? And we explained in our humble Sefer, Elakad Meir Anini, that since this Parsha is the Parsha of the Golos and the Parsha of Ikav Sada Mashiach, which ultimately the svara that protects the Jewish people in the Golos and the svara that will ultimately bring the Geula is Shitas Rav Meir, that no matter what madrega we're on, bein kach u bein kach nikra banim, we are always considered the children of Hashem. So at this critical juncture, that Parshas Vayishlach portends to the Golos of the Jewish people and the Geula, there is no one more important to preserve us in the Golos and to help us be redeemed than Shitas Rav Meir. After all, we know Mashiach will reveal itself in Tiberia, the city of Rav Meir, as the Ben Yehoyada quotes Emes Yaakov, that the Mashiach could only come based on the svara that even if we're undeserving, Hashem will disregard the tightness of the nations of the world and redeem us just because we're banim la'makayim. And therefore it is so critical in this parsha that portends to the Golos and the Geula, Yaakov Avinu preserves the Tana Rav Meir. As Reb Chaim Falaji tells us that we always have to be thinking about the great Tana Rav Meir because that is our source of vitality in the Golos. And as Ben Yehoyada writes, the Tana Rav Meir is buried standing because it is his shita of Ben Kach u Ben Kach Nikram Banim that stand up for us throughout the Golos and ultimately will be the springboard for the Geula Shlema. May we be zeicha to it. B'mher v'yaminu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.